Part 1 of Tristram and Iseult by Matthew Arnold. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Tristram and Iseult by Matthew Arnold. Part 1. Tristram.
Is she not come? The messenger was sure. Prop me upon the pillows once again. Raise me, my page. This cannot long endure. Christ, what a night! How the sleet whips the pane! What lights will those out to the northward be?
The lanterns of the fishing boats at sea.
Soft, who is that stands by the dying fire?
Iseult.
Ah, not the Iseult I desire.
What knight is this so weak and pale, though the locks are yet brown on his noble head, propped on pillows in his bed, gazing seaward for the light of some ship that fights the gale, on this wild December night? Over the sick man's feet is spread a dark green forest dress. A gold harp leans against the bed, ruddy in the fire's light. I know him by his harp of gold, famous in Arthur's court of old. I know him by his forest dress, the peerless hunter, harper knight, Tristram of Lyonesse. What lady is this, whose silk attire gleams so rich in the light of the fire, the ringlets on her shoulders lying in their flitting lustre vying with the clasp of burnished gold which her heavy robe doth hold? Her looks are mild, her fingers slight as the driven snow are white, but her cheeks are sunk and pale. Is it that the bleak sea gale, beating from the Atlantic sea on this coast of Brittany, nips too keenly the sweet flower? Is it that a deep fatigue hath come on her, a chilly fear, passing all her youthful hour spinning with her maidens here, listlessly through the window bars, gazing seawards many a league from her lonely shore-built tower, while the knights are at the wars? Or perhaps has her young heart felt already some deeper smart of those that in secret the heartstrings rive, leaving her sunk and pale though fair? Who is this snowdrop by the sea? I know her by her mildness rare, her snow-white hands, her golden hair. I know her by her rich silk dress, and her fragile loveliness. The sweetest Christian soul alive, Iseult of Brittany. Iseult of Brittany? But where is that other Iseult fair, that proud first Iseult, Cornwall's queen? She whom Tristram's ship of yore from Ireland to Cornwall bore, to Tyntagel, to the side of King Mark, to be his bride. She who, as they voyaged, quaff'd with Tristram that spiced magic draught, which since then for ever rolls through their blood and binds their souls, working love but working teen. There were two Iseults who did sway each her hour of Tristram's day, but one possessed his waning time, the other his resplendent prime. Behold her here, the patient flower, who possessed his darker hour. Iseult of the snow-white hand watches pale by Tristram's bed. She is here who had his gloom. Where are thou who hadst his bloom? One such kiss as those of yore might thy dying knight restore. Does the love draught work no more? Art thou cold, or false, or dead, Iseult of Ireland? Loud howls the wind, sharp patters the rain, and the knight sinks back on his pillows again. He is weak with fever and pain, and his spirit is not clear. Hark, he mutters in his sleep as he wanders far from here, changes place and time of year, and his closed eye doth sweep over some fair unwintry sea, not this fierce Atlantic deep, as he mutters brokenly.
The calm sea shines, loose hang the vessel's sails. Before us are the sweet green fields of Wales, and overhead the cloudless sky of May. Ah, would I were in those green fields at play, not pent on shipboard this delicious day. Tristram, I play thee of thy courtesy, reach me my golden cup that stands by thee, but pledge me in it first for courtesy. Ha! Dost thou start? Are thy lips blanched like mine? Child, 'tis no water, this 'tis poisoned wine. Iseult!
Ah, sweet angels, let him dream, keep his eyelids, let him seem not this fever-wasted wight, thinn'd and paled before his time, but the brilliant youthful knight, in the glory of his prime, sitting in the gilded barge, at thy side, thou lovely charge, bending gaily over thy hand, Iseult of Ireland. And she too, that princess fair, if her bloom be now less rare, let her have her youth again, let her be as she was then. Let her have her proud dark eyes, and her petulant quick replies. Let her sweep her dazzling hand with its gesture of command, and shake back her raven hair with the old imperious air. As of old, so let her be, that first Iseult, princess bright, chatting with her youthful knight, as he steers her over the sea, quitting at her father's will the green isle where she was bred, and her bower in Ireland for the surge-beat Cornish strand, where the prince whom she must wed dwells on loud Tyntagel's hill, high above the sounding sea. And that golden cup her mother gave her, that her future lord gave her, that King Mark and she might drink it on their marriage day, and for ever love each other. Let her, as she sits on board, ah, sweet saints, unwittingly see it shine and take it up, and to Tristram laughing say, Sir Tristram, of thy courtesy pledge me in my golden cup. Let them drink it, let their hands tremble and their cheeks be flame, as they feel the fatal bands of a love they dare not name, with a wild delicious pain twine about their hearts again. Let the early summer be once more round them, and the sea blue, and over its mirror kind let the breath of the May wind, wandering through their drooping sails, die on the green fields of Wales. Let a dream like this restore what his eye must see no more.
Chill blows the wind, the pleasance walks are drear. Madcap, what jest was this to meet me here, with feet like those made for so wild a way? The southern winter parlour by my fay had been the likeliest trysting place to-day. Tristram, nay, nay, thou must not take my hand. Tristram, sweet love, we are betray'd, outplann'd. Fly, save thyself, save me, I dare not stay. One last kiss first, 'tis vain, to horse, away!
Ah, sweet saints, his dream doth move faster surely than it should, from the fever in his blood. All the springtime of his love is already gone and past, and instead thereof is seen its winter, which endureth still. Tyntagel on its surge-beat hill, the pleasance walks, the weeping queen, the flying leaves, the straining blast, and that long wild kiss, their last. And this rough December night, and his burning fever pain, mingle with his hurrying dream, till they rule it, till he seem the press'd fugitive again, the love desperate banished knight, with a fire in his brain, flying over the stormy main. Whither does he wander now? Haply in his dreams the wind wafts him here, and lets him find the lovely orphan child again, in her castle by the coast, the youngest fairest chatelaine that this realm of France can boast, our snowdrop by the Atlantic sea, Iseult of Brittany. And for through the haggard air, the stained arms, the matted hair of that stranger knight ill starr'd, there gleam'd something which recall'd the Tristram who in better days was Lancelot's guest at Joyous Gard, welcomed here and here install'd, tended of his fever here. Haply he seems again to move his young guardian's heart with love, in his exiled loneliness, in his stately deep distress, without a word, without a tear. Ah, 'tis well he should retrace his tranquil life in this lone place, his gentle bearing at the side of his timid youthful bride, his long rambles by the shore on winter evenings, when the roar of the near waves came sadly grand through the dark up the drowned sand, or his endless revelries in the woods where the gleams play on the grass under the trees, passing the long summer's day idle as a mossy stone in the forest depths alone, the chase neglected, and his hound couch'd beside him on the ground. Ah, what troubles on his brow! Hither let him wander now, hither to the quiet hours passed among these heaths of ours, by the grey Atlantic sea, hours, if not of ecstasy, from violent anguish surely free.
All red with blood the whirling river flows, the wide plain rings, the day's air throbs with blows. Upon us are the chivalry of Rome, their spears are down, their steeds are bathed in foam. Up, Tristram, up! Men cry. Thou moonstruck knight, what foul fiend rides thee? On into the fight! Above the din her voice is in my ears, I see her form glide through the crossing spears. Iseult!
Ah, he wanders forth again, we cannot keep him now as then. There's a secret in his breast which will never let him rest. These musing fits in the green wood, they cloud the brain, they dull the blood. His sword is sharp, his horse is good. Beyond the mountains will he see the famous towns of Italy, and label with the blessed sign the heathen Saxons on the Rhine. At Arthur's side he fights once more with the Roman emperor. There's many a gay night where he goes will help him to forget his care. The march, the leaguer, heaven's blithe air, the neighing steeds, the ringing blows, sick pining comes not where these are. Ah, what boots it that the jest lightens every other brow? What, that every other breast dances as the trumpets blow? If one's own heart beats not light on the waves of the tossed fight, if oneself cannot get free from the clog of misery. Thy lovely youthful wife grows pale, watching by the salt sea tide, with her children at her side, for the gleam of thy white sail. Home, Tristram, to thy halls again, to our lonely sea complain, to our forests tell thy pain.
All round the forest sweeps off black in shade, but it is moonlight in the open glade, and in the bottom of the glade shine clear the forest chapel and the fountain near. I think I have a fever in my blood. Come, let me leave the shadow of this wood, ride down and bathe my hot brow in the flood. Mild shines the cold spring in the moon's clear light. God, 'Tis her face plays in the waters bright. Fair love, she says, canst thou forget so soon, at this soft hour, under this sweet moon? Iseult!
Ah, poor soul, if this be so, only death can balm thy woe. The solitudes of the green wood had no medicine for thy mood. The rushing battle clear'd thy blood as little as did solitude. Ah! His eyelids slowly break their hot seals, and let him wake. What new change shall we now see? A happier? Worse it cannot be.
Is my page here? Come, turn me to the fire. Upon the window panes the moon shines bright. The wind is down, but she'll not come to-night. Ah no, she is asleep in Cornwall now. Far hence her dreams are fair, smooth is her brow. Of me she recks not, nor my vain desire. I have had dreams, my page. Would take a score years from a strong man's age, and with a blood like mine will leave, I fear, scant leisure for a second messenger. My princess, art thou here? Sweet, 'tis too late. To bed and sleep, my fever is gone by. To-night my page shall keep me company. Where do the children sleep? Kiss them for me. Poor child, thou art almost as pale as I. This comes of nursing long and watching late. To bed, good night.
She left the gleam-lit fireplace, she came to the bedside. She took his hands in hers, her tears down on her slender fingers rained. She raised her eyes upon his face, not with a look of wounded pride, a look as if the heart complained. Her look was like a sad embrace, the gaze of one who can divine a grief and sympathise. Sweet flower, thy children's eyes are not more innocent than thine. But they sleep in shelter'd rest, like helpless birds in the warm nest, on the castle's southern side, where feebly comes the mournful roar of buffeting wind and surging tide through many a room and corridor. Full on their window the moon's ray makes their chamber as bright as day. It shines upon the blank white walls, and on the snowy pillow falls, and on two angel heads doth play. Turned to each other, the eyes closed, the lashes on the cheeks reposed. Round each sweet brow the cap close set hardly lets peep the golden hair. Through the soft open'd lips the air scarcely moves the coverlet. One little wandering arm is thrown at random on the counterpane, and often the fingers close in haste, as if their baby owner chased the butterflies again. This stir they have, and this alone, but else they are so still. Ah, tired madcaps, you lie still. But were you at the window now, to look forth on the fairy sight of your illumined haunts by night, to see the parklades where you play, far lovelier than they are by day, to see the sparkle on the eaves and upon every giant bough of those old oaks, whose wet red leaves are jewelled with bright drops of rain, how would your voices run again! And far beyond the sparkling trees of the castle park one sees the bare heath spreading clear as day, moor behind moor, far, far away into the heart of Brittany. And here and there, locked by the land, long inlets of smooth glittering sea, and many a stretch of watery sand, all shining in the white moonbeams. But you see fairer in your dreams. What voices are these on the clear night air? What lights in the court? What steps on the stair? End of part 1. Recorded by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Part 2 of Tristram and Iseult by Matthew Arnold. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Tristam and Iseult by Matthew Arnold. Part 2. Iseult of Ireland.
Raise the light, my page, that I may see her. Thou art come at last then, haughty queen. Long I've waited, long I've fought my fever. Late thou comest, cruel thou hast been.
Blame me not, poor sufferer, that I tarried. Bound I was, I could not break the band. Chide not with the past, but feel the present. I am here, we meet, I hold thy hand.
Thou art come indeed, thou hast rejoined me. Thou hast dared it, but too late to save. Fear not now that men should tax thine honour. I am dying, build thou mayst my grave.
Tristram, ah, for love of heaven speak kindly. What, I hear these bitter words from thee? Sick with grief I am, and faint with trouble. Take my hand, dear Tristram, look on me.
I forgot thou comest from thy voyage. Yes, the spray is on thy cloak and hair. But thy dark eyes are not dimmed, proud Iseult, and thy beauty never was more fair.
Ah, harsh flatterer, let alone my beauty. I, like thee, have left my youth afar. Take my hand and touch these wasted fingers. See my cheek and lips, how white they are.
Thou art paler, but thy sweet charm, Iseult, would not fade with the dull years away. Ah, how fair thou standest in the moonlight! I forgive thee, Iseult. Thou wilt stay?
Fear me not, I will be always with thee. I will watch thee, tend thee, soothe thy pain, sing thee tales of true long-parted lovers, joined at evening of their days again.
No, thou shalt not speak. I should be finding something alter'd in thy courtly tone. Sit by me. I will think we've lived so in the greenwood all our lives alone.
Altered, Tristram? Not in courts, believe me. Love like mine is altered in the breast. Courtly life is light and cannot reach it. Ah, it lives, because so deep suppressed. What, thou thinkest men speak in courtly chambers words by which the wretched are consoled? What, thou thinkest this aching brow was cooler, circled, Tristram, by a band of gold? Royal state with Mark, my deep wronged husband, that was bliss to make my sorrows flee. Silken courtiers whispering honeyed nothings, those were friends to make me false to thee. Ah, on which, if both our lots were balanced, was indeed the heaviest burden thrown. Thee, a pining exile in thy forest, me, a smiling queen upon thy throne. Vain and strange debate, where both have suffered, both have passed a youth constrained and sad. Both have brought their anxious day to evening, and have now short space for being glad. Joined we are henceforth, nor will thy people, nor thy younger Iseult, take it ill, that a former rival shares her office, when she sees her humbled, pale, and still. I, a faded watcher by thy pillow, I, a statue on thy chapel floor, hoarding grief before the Virgin Mother, rouse no anger, make no rivals more. She will cry, is this the foe I dreaded, this his idol, this that royal bride? Ah, an hour of health would purge his eyesight. Stay, pale queen, for ever by my side. Hush, no words, that smile I see forgives me. I am now thy nurse, I bid thee sleep. Close thine eyes, this flooding moonlight blinds them. Nay, all's well again, thou must not weep.
I am happy, yet I feel there's something swells my heart and takes my breath away. Through a mist I see thee near. Come nearer, bend down, I yet have much to say.
Heaven, his head sinks back upon the pillow. Tristram, Tristram, let thy heart not fail. Call on God and on the holy angels. What love, courage, Christ, he is so pale.
Hush, 'tis vain, I feel my end approaching. This is what my mother said should be, when the fierce pains took her in the forest, the deep draughts of death in bearing me. Son, she said, thy name shall be of sorrow. Tristram art thou called for my death's sake. So she said, and died in the drear forest. Grief since then his home with me doth make. I'm dying, start not, nor look wildly. Me, thy living friend, thou canst not save. But since living we were ununited, go not far, O Iseult, from my grave. Rise, go hence, and seek the princess Iseult. Speak her fair, she is of royal blood. Say, I charged her that thou stay beside me. She will grant it, she is kind and good. Now to sail the seas of death I leave thee. One last kiss upon the living shore.
Tristram, Tristram, stay, receive me with thee. Iseult leaves thee, Tristram, never more.
You see them clear, the moon shines bright. Slow, and softly where she stood she sinks upon the ground. Her hood has fallen back, her arms outspread still holds her lover's hands. Her head is bowed, half buried on the bed. Over the blanched sheet her raven hair lies in disordered streams, and there, strung like white stars, the pearls still are, and the golden bracelets, heavy and rare, flash on her white arm still. The very same which yesternight flashed in the silver sconces light, when the feast was gay and the laughter loud in Tyntagel's palace proud. But then they deck'd a restless ghost, with hot flush'd cheeks and brilliant eyes, and quivering lips, on which the tide of courtly speech abruptly died, and a glance which over the crowded floor, the dancers, and the festive host flew ever to the door. But the knights eyed her in surprise, and the dames whisper'd scoffingly, her moods, good lack, they pass like showers. But yesternight, and she would be as pale and still as withered flowers, and now to-night she laughs and speaks, and has a colour in her cheeks. Christ keep us from such fantasy. Yes, now the longing is overpast, which, dogg'd by fear and fought by shame, shook her weak bosom day and night, consumed her beauty like a flame, and dimm'd it like the desert blast. And though the curtains hide her face, yet were it lifted to the light, the sweet expression of her brow would charm the gazer till his thought erased the ravages of time, filled up the hollow cheek, and brought a freshness back as of her prime. So healing is her quiet now, so perfectly the lines express a tranquil, settled loveliness, her younger rival's purest grace. The air of the December night steals coldly around the chamber bright, where those lifeless lovers be. Swinging with it in the light flaps the ghost-like tapestry, and on the arras wrought you see a stately huntsman clad in green, and round him a fresh forest scene. On that clear forest knoll he stays, with his pack round him, and delays. He stares and stares with troubled face at this huge gleam-lit fireplace, at that bright iron-figured door, and those blown rushes on the floor. He gazes down into the room with heated cheeks and flurried air, and to himself he seems to say, "What place is this, and who are they? Who is that kneeling lady fair? And on his pillows that pale knight, who seems of marble on a tomb? How comes it here, this chamber bright, through whose mullioned windows clear the castle court, all wet with rain, the drawbridge and the moat appear, and then the beach, and marked with spray the sunken reefs, and far away the unquiet bright Atlantic plain? What! has some glamour made me sleep, and sent me with my dogs to sweep by night with boisterous bugle peal through some old seaside nightly hall, not in the free green wood at all? That night's asleep, and at her prayer that lady by the bed doth kneel. Then hush, thou boisterous bugle peal! The wild boar rustles in his lair, the fierce hounds snuff the tainted air, but lord and hounds keep rooted there. Cheer, cheer thy dogs into the brake, O hunter, and without a fear thy golden tasselled bugle blow, and through the glades thy pastime take, for thou wilt rouse no sleepers here, for these thou seest are unmoved, cold, cold as those who lived and loved 1,000 years ago. End of part 2. Recorded by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Part 3 of Tristram and Iseult by Matthew Arnold. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Tristram and Iseult by Matthew Arnold. Part 3. Iseult of Brittany. A year had flown, and over the sea away in Cornwall Tristram and Queen Iseult lay, in King Mark's chapel in Tyntagel old. There in a ship they bore those lovers cold. The young surviving Iseult one bright day had wandered forth. Her children were at play in a green circular hollow in the heath, which borders the seashore. A country path creeps over it from the tilled fields behind. The hollow's grassy banks are soft inclined, and to one standing on them far and near, the lone unbroken view spreads bright and clear over the waste. This cirque of open ground is light and green. The heather, which all round creeps thickly, grows not here, but the pale grass is strewn with rocks, and many a shivered mass of veined white gleaming quartz, and here and there dotted with holly trees and juniper. In the smooth centre of the opening stood 3 hollies side by side, and made a screen, warm with the winter sun, of burnished green, with scarlet berries gemmed, the fell fare's food. Under the glittering hollies Iseult stands, watching her children play. Their little hands are busy gathering spars of quartz, and streams of stag's horn for their hats. Anon with screams of mad delight they drop their spoils, and bound among the holly clumps and broken ground, racing full speed, and startling in their rush the fell fares and the speckled missel thrush out of their glossy coverts. But when now their cheeks were flushed, and over each hot brow, under the feathered hats of the sweet pair, in blinding masses showered the golden hair, then Iseult called them to her, and the 3 clustered under the holly screen, and she told them an old world Breton history. Warm in their mantles wrapped, the 3 stood there under the hollies in the clean still air, mantles with those rich furs deep glistering, which Venice ships do from swart Egypt bring. Long they stayed still, then pacing at their ease moved up and down under the glossy trees. But still, as they pursued their warm dry road, from Iseult's lips the unbroken story flowed, and still the children listened, their blue eyes fixed on their mother's face in wide surprise. Nor did their looks stray once to the seaside, or to the brown heaths round them bright and wide, or to the snow, which, though 'twas all away from the open heath, still by the hedgerows lay, or to the shining sea-fowl that with screams bore up from where the bright Atlantic gleams, swooping to landward. nor to where, quite clear, the fell fares settled on the thickets near. And they would still have listened, till dark night came keen and chill down on the heather bright. But when the red glow on the sea grew cold, and the grey turrets of the castle old looked sternly through the frosty evening air, then Iseult took by the hand those children fair, and brought her tale to an end, and found the path, and led them home over the darkening heath. And is she happy? Does she see unmoved the days in which she might have lived and loved slip without bringing bliss slowly away, one after one, to-morrow like to-day? Joy has not found her yet, nor ever will. Is it this thought which makes her mien so still, her features so fatigued, her eyes, though sweet, so sunk, so rarely lifted, save to meet her children's? She moves slow, her voice alone hath yet an infantine and silver tone, but even that comes languidly. In truth, she seems one dying in a mask of youth. And now she will go home, and softly lay her laughing children in their beds, and play a while with them before they sleep. And then she'll light her silver lamp, which fishermen, dragging their nets through the rough waves afar along this iron coast, know like a star, and take her broidery frame. And there she'll sit hour after hour, her gold curls sweeping it, lifting her soft bent head only to mind her children, or to listen to the wind. And when the clock peals midnight, she will move her work away, and let her fingers rove across the shaggy brows of Tristram's hound, who lies guarding her feet along the ground. Or else she will fall musing, her blue eyes fixed, her slight hands clasped on her lap, then rise, and at her prie-dieu kneel, until she have told her rosary beads of ebony tipped with gold. Then to her soft sleep, and to-morrow will be to-day's exact repeated effigy. Yes, it is lonely for her in the hall. The children and the grey-haired seneschal, her women, and Sir Tristram's aged hound, are there the sole companions to be found. But these she loves, and noisier life than this she would find ill to bear, weak as she is. She has her children too, and night and day is with them, and the wide heaths where they play, the hollies and the cliff and the seashore, the sand, the sea-birds and the distant sails. These are to her dear as to them the tales with which this day the children she beguiled, she gleaned from Breton grandames when a child, in every hut along this sea-coast wild. She herself loves them still, and when they are told, can forget all to hear them as of old. Dear saints, it is not sorrow as I hear, not suffering which shuts up eye and ear to all that has delighted them before, and lets us be what we were once no more. No, we may suffer deeply, yet retain power to be moved and soothed for all our pain by what of old pleased us, and will again. No, 'tis the gradual furnace of the world, in whose hot air our spirits are upcooled until they crumble, or else grow like steel, which kills in us the bloom, the youth, the spring, which leaves the fierce necessity to feel, but takes away the power. This can avail, by drying up our joy in everything, to make our former pleasures all seem stale. This, or some tyrannous single thought, some fit of passion which subdues our souls to it, till for its sake alone we live and move. Call it ambition, or remorse, or love. This too can change us wholly, and make seem all which we did before shadow and dream. And yet I swear it angers me to see how this fool passion gulls men potently, being in truth but a diseased unrest, and an unnatural overheat at best. How they are full of languor and distress, not having it, which when they do possess, they straightway are burnt up with fume and care, and spend their lives in posting here and there, where this plague drives them, and have little ease, are furious with themselves, and hard to please. Like that bold Caesar, the famed Roman wight, who wept at reading of a Grecian knight who made a name at younger years than he. Or that renowned mirror of chivalry, Prince Alexander, Philip's peerless son, who carried the great war from Macedon into the Sudan's realm, and thundered on to die at 35 in Babylon. What tale did Iseult to the children say under the hollies that bright winter's day? She told them of the fairy haunted land, away the other side of Brittany, beyond the heaths edged by the lonely sea, of the deep forest glades of Brocéliande, through whose green boughs the golden sunshine creeps, where Merlin by the enchanted thorn tree sleeps. For here he came with the fay Vivian one April, when the warm days first began. He was on foot, and that false fay his friend, on her white palfrey. Here he met his end, in these lone sylvan glades that April day. This tale of Merlin and the lovely Fay was the one Iseult chose, and she brought clear before the children's fancy him and her. Blowing between the stems, the forest air had loosened the brown curls of Vivian's hair, which played on her flushed cheek, and her blue eyes sparkled with mocking glee and exercise. Her palfrey's flanks were mired and bathed in sweat, for they had travelled far and not stopped yet. A briar in that tangled wilderness had scored her white right hand, which she allows to rest ungloved on her green riding dress. The other warded off the drooping boughs. But still she chatted on with her blue eyes fixed full on Merlin's face, her stately prize. Her haviour had the morning's fresh clear grace, the spirit of the woods was in her face. She looked so witching fair that learned wight forgot his craft and his best wits took flight, and he grew fond and eager to obey his mistress, use her empire as she may. They came to where the brushwood ceased, and day peer'd twixt the stems, and the ground broke away in a sloped sward down to the brawling brook. And up as high as where they stood to look on the brook's farther side was clear, but then the underwood and trees began again. This open glen was studded thick with thorns, then white with blossom, and you saw the horns, through the green fern, of the shy fallow deer who come at noon down to the water here. You saw the bright-eyed squirrels dart along under the thorns on the green sward, and strong the blackbird whistled from the dingles near, and the weird chipping of the woodpecker rang lonelily and sharp. The sky was fair, and a fresh breath of spring stirred everywhere. Merlin and Vivian stopped on the slope's brow to gaze on the green sea of leaf and bough, which glistering lay all round them, lone and mild, as if to itself the quiet forest smiled. Upon the brow-top grew a thorn, and here the grass was dry and mossed, and you saw clear across the hollow white anemones starred the cool turf, and clumps of primroses ran out from the dark underwood behind. No fairer resting place a man could find. Here let us halt, said Merlin then, and she nodded, and tied her palfrey to a tree. They sate them down together, and a sleep fell upon Merlin, more like death, so deep. Her finger on her lips, then Vivian rose, and from her brown-locked head the wimple throws, and takes it in her hand, and waves it over the blossomed thorn-tree and her sleeping lover. 9 times she waved the fluttering wimple round, and made a little plot of magic ground. And in that daisied circle, as men say, is Merlin prisoner till the judgment day. But she herself whither she will can rove, for she was passing weary of his love. End of Part 3. End of Tristram and Iseult by Matthew Arnold. Recorded by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Sohrab and Rustum by Matthew Arnold. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Sohrab and Rustum by Matthew Arnold. And the first grey of morning filled the east, and the fog rose out of the Oxus stream. But all the Tartar camp along the stream was hushed and still, the men were plunged in sleep. Sohrab alone, he slept not all night long, he had lain wakeful, tossing on his bed. But when the grey dawn stole into his tent, he rose and clad himself, and girt his sword, and took his horseman's cloak, and left his tent, and went abroad into the cold wet fog, through the dim camp to Peran Wisa's tent. Through the black Tartar tents he passed, which stood clustering like beehives on the low flat strand of Oxus, where the summer floods overflow, when the sun melts the snows in high Pamere. Through the black tents he passed over that low strand, and to a hillock came, a little back from the stream's brink, the spot where first a boat, crossing the stream in summer, scrapes the land. The men of former times had crowned the top with a clay ford, but that was fallen, and now the Tartars built their Peran Wisa's tent, a dome of laths, and over it felts were spread. And Sohrab came there, and went in, and stood upon the thick-piled carpets in the tent, and found the old man sleeping on his bed of rugs and felts, and near him lay his arms. And Peran Wisa heard him, though the step was dulled, for he slept light an old man's sleep. And he rose quickly on one arm, and said, Who art thou? For it is not yet clear dawn. Speak, is there news, or any night alarm? But Sohrab came to his bedside, and said, Thou know'st me, Peran Wisa, it is I. The sun is not yet risen, and the foe sleep, but I sleep not, all night long I lie, tossing and wakeful, and I come to thee. So did King Afrasiab bid me seek thy counsel, and to heed thee as thy son. And Samarcand before the army march'd, and I will tell thee what my heart desires. Thou know'st if, since from Azerbaijan first I came among the Tartars, and bore arms, I have still served Afrasiab well, and shown, at my boy's years, the courage of a man. This too thou know'st, that while I still bear on the conquering Tartar ensigns through the world, and beat the Persians back on every field, I seek one man and one alone, Rustum, my father, who I hoped should one day greet upon some well-fought field his not unworthy, not inglorious son. So I long hoped, but him I never find. Come then, hear now, and grant me what I ask. Let the two armies rest today, but I will challenge forth the bravest Persian lords to meet me, man to man. If I prevail, Rustum will surely hear it. If I fall, old man, the dead need no one claim, no kin. Dim is the rumour of a common fight, where host meets host, and many names are sunk, but of a single combat fame speaks clear. He spoke, and Peran Wisa took the hand of the young man in his, and sighed and said, O Sohrab, an unquiet heart is thine. Canst thou not rest among the Tartar chiefs, and share the battle's common chance with us, who love thee, but must press for ever first in single fight, incurring single risk to find a father thou hast never seen? That were far best, my son, to stay with us, unmurmuring, in our tents while it is war, and when 'tis truce, then in Afrasiab's towns. But if this one desire indeed rules all, to seek out Rustum, seek him not through fight, seek him in peace, and carry to his arms, O Sohrab, carry an unwounded son. But far hence seek him, for he is not here. For now it is not as when I was young, when Rustum was in front of every fray, but now he keeps apart and sits at home, and Sistan with Zal his father old. Whether that his own mighty strength at last feels the abhorr'd approaches of old age, or in some quarrel with the Persian king, there go, thou wilt not, yet my heart forebodes. Danger or death awaits thee on this field. Fain would I know thee safe and well, though lost to us. Fain therefore send thee hence in peace to seek thy father, not seek single fights in vain. But who can keep the lion's cub from ravening, and who govern Rustum's son? Go, I will grant thee what thy heart desires. So said he, and dropped Sohrab's hand, and left his bed and the warm rugs whereon he lay, and over his chilly limbs his woolen coat he passed, and tied his sandals on his feet, and threw a white cloak round him. And he took in his right hand a ruler's staff, no sword, and on his head he set his sheepskin cap, black glossy, curled, the fleece of Caracal, and raised the curtain of his tent, and called his herald to his side, and went abroad. The sun by this had risen, and clear'd the fog from the broad Oxus and the glittering sands, and from their tents the Tartar horsemen filed into the open plain. So Haman bade, Haman, who next to Peran Wisa ruled the host, and still was in his lusty prime. From their black tents long files of horse they stream'd, as when some grey November morn the files in marching order spread of long-neck'd cranes stream over Caspian and the southern slopes of Elburz from the Araluan estuaries, or some frore Caspian reed bed southward bound for the warm Persian seaboard. So they streamed, the Tartars of the Oxus, the king's guard, first, with black sheepskin caps and with long spears, large men, large steeds, who from Bokhara come, and Khiva, and ferment the milk of mares. Next, the more temperate Turkmans of the south, the Tukas and the Lancers of Salor, and those from Atrak and the Caspian sands, light men and light steeds, who only drink the acrid milk of camels and their wells. And then a swarm of wandering horse, who came from far, and a more doubtful service own'd, the Tartars of Fergana, from the banks of the Jaxartes, men with scanty beards and close-set skull-caps, and those wilder hordes who roam over Kipchak and the northern waste, Kalmucks and unkempt Cossacks, tribes who stray nearest the pole, and wandering Kirghizzes who come on shaggy ponies from Pamir. These all filed out from camp into the plain, and on the other side the Persians formed, first a light cloud of horse, Tartars they seemed, the Ilyats of Khorasan, and behind the royal troops of Persia, horse and foot, marshalled battalions bright in burnished steel. But Peran Wisa with his herald came, threading the Tartar squadrons to the front, and with his staff kept back the foremost ranks. And when Ferood, who led the Persians, saw that Peran Wisa kept the Tartars back, he took his spear, and to the front he came, and checked his ranks, and fixed them where they stood. The old Tartar came upon the sand betwixt the silent hosts, and spake, and said, Ferood, and ye Persians and Tartars, hear! Let there be truce between the hosts to-day. But choose a champion from the Persian lords, to fight our champion Sohrab, man to man. As in the country on a morn in June, when the dew glistens on the pearled ears, a shiver runs through the deep corn for joy, so when they heard what Peran Wisa said, a thrill through all the Tartar squadrons ran, of pride and hope for Sohrab, whom they loved. But as a troop of pedlars from Kabul cross underneath the Indian Caucasus, that vast sky neighbouring mountain of milk snow, crossing so high that, as they mount, they pass long flocks of travelling birds, dead on the snow, choked by the air, and scarce can they themselves slake their parched throats with sugared mulberries. In single file they move, and stop their breath, for fear they should dislodge the overhanging snows. So the pale Persians held their breath with fear. And to Ferood his brother chiefs came up to council. Gudurz and Zorar came, and Faraburz, who ruled the Persian host, second, and was the uncle of the king. These came and counselled, and then Gudurz said: Ferood, shame bids us take their challenge up, yet champion have we none to match this youth. He has the wild stag's foot, the lion's heart. But Rustum came last night, aloof he sits and sullen, and has pitch'd his tents apart. Him will I seek, and carry to his ear the Tartar challenge and this young man's name. Haply he will forget his wrath and fight. Stand forth the while, and take their challenge up. So spake he, and Ferood stood forth and cried: Old man, be it agreed as thou hast said. Let Sohrab arm, and we will find a man. He spake, and Peran Wisa turned and strode back through the opening squadrons to his tent. But through the anxious Persians Gudurz ran, and crossed the camp which lay behind, and reached out on the sands beyond it Rustum's tents. Of scarlet cloth they were, and glittering gay. Just pitch'd the high pavilion, in the midst was Rustum's, and his men lay camp'd around. And Gudurz enter'd Rustum's tent, and found Rustum. His morning meal was done, but still the table stood before him, charged with food, a side of roasted sheep, and cakes of bread, and dark green melons. And there Rustum sate listless, and held a falcon on his wrist, and played with it. But Gudurz came and stood before him, and he looked and saw him stand, and with a cry sprang up and dropped the bird, and greeted Gudurz with both hands, and said: Welcome! These eyes could see no better sight. What news? But sit down first, and eat and drink. But Gudurz stood in the tent door, and said: Not now. A time will come to eat and drink, but not to-day. To-day has other needs. The armies are drawn out, and stand at gaze. For from the Tartars is a challenge brought, to pick a champion from the Persian lords, to fight their champion. And thou know'st his name. Sohrab men call him, but his birth is hid. O Rustum, like thy might is this young man's. He has the wild stag's foot, the lion's heart, and he is young. And Iran's chiefs are old, or else too weak, and all eyes turn to thee. Come down and help us, Rustum, or we lose. He spoke, but Rustum answered with a smile: Go to! If Iran's chiefs are old, then I am older. If the young are weak, the king errs strangely for the king. For Kai Khosroo himself is young, and honours younger men, and lets the aged moulder to their graves. Rustum he loves no more, but loves the young. The young may rise at Sohrab's vaunts, not I. For what care I, though all speak Sohrab's fame? For would that I myself had such a son, and not the one slight helpless girl I have, a son so famed, so brave, to send to war. And I to tarry with the snow-haired Zal, my father, whom the robber Afghans vex, and clip his borders short, and drive his herds, and he has none to guard his weak old age. There would I go, and hang my armour up, and with my great name fence that weak old man, and spend the goodly treasures I have got, and rest my age, and hear of Sohrab's fame, and leave to death the hosts of thankless kings, and with these slaughterous hands draw sword no more. He spoke and smiled, and Gudurz made reply: What then, O Rustum? Will men say to this, when Sohrab dares our bravest forth, and seeks thee most of all, and thou, whom most he seeks, hidest thy face? Take heed lest men should say, like some old miser, Rustum hoards his fame, and shuns to peril it with younger men. And greatly moved, then Rustum made reply: O Gudurz, wherefore dost thou say such words? Thou knowest better words than this to say. What is one more, one less, obscure or famed, valiant or craven, young or old, to me? Are not they mortal? Am not I myself? But who for men of nought would do great deeds? Come, thou shalt see how Rustum hoards his fame. But I will fight unknown, and in plain arms. Let not men say of Rustum, he was match'd in single fight with any mortal man. He spoke and frown'd, and Gudurz turn'd and ran back quickly through the camp in fear and joy. Fear at his wrath, but joy that Rustum came. But Rustum strode to his tent door, and call'd his followers in, and bade them bring his arms, and clad himself in steel. The arms he chose were plain, and on his shield was no device, only his helm was rich, inlaid with gold, and from the fluted spine atop a plume of horsehair waved, a scarlet horsehair plume. So arm'd he issued forth, and Ruksh his horse followed him like a faithful hound at heel. Ruksh, whose renown was noised through all the earth, the horse whom Rustum on a foray once did in Bokhara by the river find a colt beneath its dam, and drove him home, and reared him a bright bay with lofty crest, dight with a saddlecloth of broidered green, crusted with gold, and on the ground was worked all beasts of chase, all beasts which hunters know. So followed Rustum, left his tents, and crossed the camp, and to the Persian host appear'd. And all the Persians knew him, and with shouts hail'd, but the Tartars knew not who he was. And dear as the wet diver to the eyes of his pale wife, who waits and weeps on shore by sandy Bahrain in the Persian Gulf, plunging all day in the blue waves, at night, having made up his tale of precious pearls, joins her in their hut upon the sand, so dear to the pale Persians Rustum came. And Rustum to the Persian front advanced, and Sohrab arm'd in Haman's tent and came. And as a field the reapers quite a swath, down through the middle of a rich man's corn, and on each side are squares of standing corn, and in the midst a stubble short and bare. So on each side were squares of men with spears bristling, and in the midst the open sand. And Rustum came upon the sand, and cast his eyes toward the Tartar tents, and saw Sohrab come forth, and eyed him as he came, as some rich woman on a winter's morn eyes through her silken curtains the poor drudge, who with numb blackened fingers makes her fire at cockcrow on a starlit winter's morn, when the frost flours the whitened window panes, and wonders how she lives, and what the thoughts of that poor drudge may be. So Rustum eyed the unknown adventurous youth, who from afar came seeking Rustum, and defying forth all the most valiant chiefs. Long he perused his spirited air, and wonder'd who he was. For very young he seem'd, tenderly rear'd, like some young cypress, tall and dark and straight, which in a queen's secluded garden throws its slight dark shadow on the moonlit turf by midnight to a bubbling fountain's sound. So slender Sohrab seem'd, so softly rear'd, and a deep pity enter'd Rustum's soul as he beheld him coming. And he stood and beckoned to him with his hand, and said: O thou young man, the air of heaven is soft and warm and pleasant, but the grave is cold. Heaven's air is better than the cold dead grave. Behold me, I am vast and clad in iron and tried, and I have stood on many a field of blood, and I have fought with many a foe. Never was that field lost, or that foe saved. O Sohrab, wherefore wilt thou rush on death? Be govern'd, quit the Tartar host, and come to Iran, and be as my son to me, and fight beneath my banner till I die. There are no youths in Iran brave as thou. So he spake mildly. Sohrab heard his voice, the mighty voice of Rustum, and he saw his giant figure planted on the sand, sole like a single tower which a chief hath builded on the waste in former years against the robbers. And he saw that head streaked with its first grey hairs. Hope filled his soul, and he ran forward and embraced his knees, and clasped his hand within his own, and said: O, by thy father's head, by thine own soul, art thou not Rustum? Speak, art thou not he? But Rustum eyed askance the kneeling youth, and turned away, and spake to his own soul: Ah me! I mused what this young fox may mean. False, wily, boastful are these Tartar boys. For if I now confess this thing he asks, and hide it not, but say Rustum is here, he will not yield indeed, nor quit our foes, but he will find some pretext not to fight, and praise my fame, and proffer courteous gifts, a belt or sword perhaps, and go his way. And on a feast tide in Afrasiab's hall in Samarcand he will arise and cry: I challenged once, when the two armies camped beside the Oxus, all the Persian lords to cope with me in single fight. But they shrank, only Rustum dared. Then he and I changed gifts, and went on equal terms away. So will he speak perhaps, while men applaud. Then were the chiefs of Iran shamed through me. And then he turned and sternly spake aloud: Rise! Wherefore dost thou vainly question thus of Rustum? I am here, whom thou hast call'd by challenge forth. Make good thy vaunt, or yield. Is it with Rustum only thou wouldst fight? Rash boy, men look on Rustum's face and flee, for well I know that did great Rustum stand before thy face this day, and were revealed, there would be then no talk of fighting more. But being what I am, I tell thee this, do thou record it in thine inmost soul: either thou shalt renounce thy vaunt and yield, or else thy bones shall strew the sand till winds bleach them, or Oxus with his summer floods, Oxus in summer, wash them all away. He spoke, and Sohrab answered on his feet: Art thou so fierce? Thou wilt not fright me so. I am no girl, to be made pale by words. Yet this thou hast said well: did Rustum stand here on this field, there were no fighting then. But Rustum is far hence, and we stand here. Begin! Thou art more vast, more dread than I, and thou art proved, I know, and I am young. But yet success sways with the breath of heaven. And though thou thinkest that thou knowest sure thy victory, yet thou canst not surely know, for we are all like swimmers in the sea, poised on the top of a huge wave of fate, which hangs uncertain to which side to fall. And whether it will heave us up to land, or whether it will roll us out to sea, back out to sea to the deep waves of death, we know not, and no search will make us know, only the event will teach us in its hour. He spoke, and Rustum answered not, but hurled his spear. Down from the shoulder down it came, as on some partridge in the corn a hawk that long has towered in the airy clouds drops like a plummet. Sohrab saw it come, and sprang aside quick as a flash. The spear hissed, and went quivering down into the sand, which it sent flying wide. Then Sohrab threw in turn, and full struck Rustum's shield. Sharp rang the iron plates, rang sharp, but turned the spear. And Rustum seized his club, which none but he could wield. An unlopped trunk it was, and huge, still rough, like those which men in treeless plains, to build them boats, fish from the flooded rivers, Hyphasis or Hydaspes, when high up by their dark springs the wind in winter time hath made in Himalayan forests wrack, and strewn the channels with torn boughs. So huge the club which Rustum lifted now, and struck one stroke. But again Sohrab sprang aside, lithe as the glancing snake, and the club came thundering to earth, and leapt from Rustum's hand. And Rustum followed his own blow, and fell to his knees, and with his fingers clutched the sand. And now might Sohrab have unsheathed his sword, and pierced the mighty Rustum, while he lay dizzy and on his knees, and choked with sand. But he looked on and smiled, nor bared his sword, but courteously drew back, and spoke and said: Thou strikest too hard. That club of thine will float upon the summer floods, and not my bones. But rise, and be not wroth am I. No, when I see thee, wrath forsakes my soul. Thou say'st thou art not Rustum. Be it so. Who art thou then, that canst so touch my soul? Boy as I am, I have seen battles too, have waded foremost in their bloody waves, and heard their hollow roar of dying men. But never was my heart thus touch'd before. Are they from heaven, these softenings of the heart? O thou old warrior, let us yield to heaven. Come, plant we here in earth our angry spears, and make a truce, and sit upon this sand, and pledge each other in red wine, like friends, and thou shalt talk to me of Rustum's deeds. There are enough foes in the Persian host, whom I may meet, and strike, and feel no pang. Champions enough a Friasab has, whom thou mayst fight. Fight them, when they confront thy spear. But oh, let there be peace twixt thee and me. He ceased. But while he spake, Rustum had risen, and stood erect, trembling with rage. His club he left to lie, but had regained his spear, whose fiery point now in his mailed right hand blazed bright and baleful, like that autumn star, the baleful sign of fevers. Dust had soiled his stately crest, and dimmed his glittering arms. His breast heaved, his lips foamed, and twice his voice was choked with rage. At last these words broke way: Girl, nimble with thy feet, not with thy hands, curled minion, dancer, coiner of sweet words, fight! Let me hear thy hateful voice no more. Thou art not in Afrasiab's gardens now, with Tartar girls with whom thou art wont to dance, but on the Oxus sands, and in the dance of battle, and with me who make no play of war. I fight it out, and hand to hand. Speak not to me of truce, and pledge, and wine. Remember all thy valour, try thy feints and cunning. All the pity I had is gone, because thou hast shamed me before both the hosts with thy light skipping tricks and thy girls' wiles. He spoke, and Sohrab kindled at his taunts, and he too drew his sword. At once they rushed together, as two eagles on one prey came rushing down together from the clouds, one from the east, one from the west. Their shields dashed with a clang together, and a din rose, such as that the sinewy woodcutters make often in the forest's heart at morn, of hewing axes, crashing trees. Such blows Rustum and Sohrab on each other hailed. And you would say the sun and stars took part in that unnatural conflict. For a cloud grew suddenly in heaven, and darked the sun over the fighters' heads, and a wind rose under their feet, and moaning swept the plain. and in a sandy whirlwind wrapp'd the pair. In gloom they twain were wrapp'd, and they alone, for both the onlooking hosts on either hand stood in broad daylight, and the sky was pure, and the sun sparkled on the Oxus stream. But in the gloom they fought, with bloodshot eyes and labouring breath. First Rustum struck the shield, which Sohrab held stiff out. The steel-spiked spear rent the tough plates, but fail'd to reach the skin, and Rustum plucked it back with angry groan. Then Sohrab with his sword smote Rustum's helm, nor clove its steel quite through, but all the crest he shore away, and that proud horsehair plume, never till now defiled, sank to the dust. And Rustum bowed his head, but then the gloom grew blacker, thunder rumbled in the air, and lightnings rent the cloud, and Rushk, the horse, who stood at hand, utter'd a dreadful cry. No horse's cry was that, most like the roar of some pain'd desert lion, who all day hath trail'd the hunter's javelin in his side, and comes at night to die upon the sand. The two hosts heard that cry, and quaked for fear, and Oxus curdled as it cross'd his stream. But Sohrab heard and quail'd not, but rush'd on, and struck again, and again Rustum bowed his head. But this time all the blade, like glass, sprang in 1,000 shivers on the helm, and in the hand the hilt remained alone. Then Rustum raised his head, his dreadful eyes glared, and he shook on high his menacing spear, and shouted, "Rustum!" Sohrab heard that shout, and shrank amazed. Back he recoiled one step, and scann'd with blinking eyes the advancing form. And then he stood bewildered, and he dropp'd his covering shield, and the spear pierced his side. He reeled, and staggering back sank to the ground. And then the gloom dispersed, and the wind fell, and the bright sun broke forth, and melted all the cloud. And the two armies saw the pair, saw Rustum standing safe upon his feet, and Sohrab wounded on the bloody sand. Then with a bitter smile Rustum began: "Sohrab, thou thoughtest in thy mind to kill a Persian lord this day, and strip his corpse, and bear thy trophies to Afrasiab's tent; or else that the great Rustum would come down himself to fight, and that thy wiles would move his heart to take a gift and let thee go; and then that all the Tartar host would praise thy courage, all thy craft, and spread thy fame, to glad thy father in his weak old age. Fool, thou art slain, and by an unknown man. Dearer to the red jackals shalt thou be than to thy friends and to thy father old." And with a fearless mien Sohrab replied: "Unknown thou art, yet thy fierce vaunt is vain. Thou dost not slay me, proud and boastful man. No, Rustum slays me, and this filial heart. For were I match'd with 10 such men as thee, and I were that which till to-day I was, they should be lying here, and I standing there. But that beloved name unnerved my arm, that name, and something I confess in thee, which troubles all my heart, and made my shield fall, and thy spear transfix'd an unarm'd foe. But now thou boastest, and insult'st my fate. But hear thou this, fierce man, tremble to hear: the mighty Rustum shall avenge my death, my father whom I seek through all the world. He shall avenge my death, and punish thee. As when some hunter in the spring hath found a breeding eagle sitting on her nest upon the craggy isle of a hill lake, and pierced her with an arrow as she rose, and followed her to find her where she fell far off. Anon her mate comes winging back from hunting, and a great way off descries his huddling young left sole. At that he checks his pinion, and with short uneasy sweeps circles above his eyrie, with loud screams chiding his mate back to her nest. But she lies dying with the arrow in her side, in some far stony gorge out of his ken, a heap of fluttering feathers. Never more shall the lake glass her, flying over it; never the black and dripping precipices echo her stormy scream as she sails by, as that poor bird flies home nor knows his loss." So Rustum knew not his own loss, but stood over his dying son, and knew him not. But with a cold incredulous voice he said: "What prate is this of fathers and revenge? The mighty Rustum never had a son." And with a failing voice Sohrab replied: "Ah, yes, he had, and that lost son am I. Surely the news will one day reach his ear, reach Rustum where he sits and tarries long, somewhere I know not where, but far from here, and pierce him like a stab, and make him leap to arms, and cry for vengeance upon thee. Fierce man, bethink thee, for an only son, what will that grief, what will that vengeance be? Oh, could I live till I that grief had seen! Yet him I pity not so much, but her, my mother, who in Ader-baijan dwells, with that old king her father, who grows grey with age, and rules over the valiant cords. Her most I pity, who no more will see Sohrab returning from the Tartar camp with spoils and honour, when the war is done. But our dark rumour will be bruited up from tribe to tribe, until it reach her ear, and then will that defenceless woman learn that Sohrab will rejoice her sight no more, but that in battle with a nameless foe by the fire of distant Oxus he is slain." He spoke, And as he ceased, he wept aloud, thinking of her he left and his own death. He spoke, but Rustum listened, plunged in thought. Nor did he yet believe it was his son who spoke, although he called back names he knew. For he had had sure tidings that the babe, which was in Azerbaijan born to him, had been a puny girl, no boy at all. So that sad mother sent him word, for fear Rustum should seek the boy to train in arms. And so he deemed that either Sohrab took, by a false boast, the style of Rustum's son, or that men gave it him to swell his fame. So deemed he, yet he listened, plunged in thought, and his soul set to grief as the vast tide of the bright rocking ocean sets to shore at the full moon. Tears gathered in his eyes, for he remembered his own early youth, and all its bounding rapture, as at dawn the shepherd from his mountain lodge descries a far bright city smitten by the sun through many rolling clouds. So Rustum saw his youth, saw Sohrab's mother in her bloom, and that old king her father, who loved well his wandering guest, and gave him his fair child with joy, and all the pleasant life they led, they three, in that long distant summer time. The castle and the dewy woods, and hunt and hound and mourn on those delightful hills and Azerbaijan. And he saw that youth of age and looks to be his own dear son, piteous and lovely, lying on the sand like some rich hyacinth which by the scythe of an unskilful gardener has been cut, mowing the garden grass plots near its bed. And lies a fragrant tower of purple bloom on the mown dying grass. So Sohrab lay, lovely in death, upon the common sand. And Rustum gazed on him with grief, and said, O Sohrab, thou indeed art such a son whom Rustum, wert thou his, might well have loved. Yet here thou errest, Sohrab, or else men have told thee false. Thou art not Rustum's son, for Rustum had no son. One child he had, but one, a girl, who with her mother now plies some light female task, nor dreams of us. Of us she dreams not, nor of wounds, nor war. But Sohrab answer'd him in wrath, for now the anguish of the deep fix'd spear grew fierce, and he desired to draw forth the steel and let the blood flow free, and so to die. But first he would convince his stubborn foe, and rising sternly on one arm, he said, Man, who art thou who dost deny my words? Truth sits upon the lips of dying men, and falsehood, while I lived, was far from mine. I tell thee, prick'd upon this arm I bear that seal which Rustum to my mother gave, that she might prick it on the babe she bore. He spoke, and all the blood left Rustum's cheeks, and his knees totter'd, and he smote his hand against his breast, his heavy mailed hand, that the hard iron corslet clank'd aloud. And to his heart he press'd the other hand, and in a hollow voice he spake, and said, Sohrab, that were a proof which could not lie. If thou show this, then art thou Rustum's son. Then with weak hasty fingers Sohrab loosed his belt, and near the shoulder bared his arm, and show'd a sign in faint vermilion points, prick'd as a cunning workman in Pekin pricks with vermilion some clear porcelain vase, an emperor's gift. At early morn he paints, and all day long, and when night comes the lamp lights up his studious forehead and thin hands. So delicately prick'd the sign appear'd on Sohrab's arm, the sign of Rustum's seal. It was that griffin which of old reared Zal, Rustum's great father, whom they left to die a helpless babe among the mountain rocks. Him that kind creature found, and reared, and loved. Then Rustum took it for his glorious sign, as Sohrab bared that image on his arm, and himself scann'd it long with mournful eyes. And then he touch'd it with his hand, and said, How say'st thou? Is that sign the proper sign of Rustum's son, or of some other man's? He spoke, but Rustum gazed, and stood speechless. And then he utter'd one sharp cry, O boy, thy father! And his voice choked there. And then a dark cloud passed before his eyes, and his head swam, and he sank down to earth. But Sohrab crawled to where he lay, and cast his arms about his neck, and kissed his lips, and with fond faltering fingers stroked his cheeks, trying to call him back to life. And life came back to Rustum, and he opened his eyes, and they stood wide with horror. And he seized in both his hands the dust which lay around, and threw it on his head, and smirched his hair. His hair and face and beard and glittering arms, and strong convulsive groanings shook his breast, and his sobs choked him, and he clutched his sword to draw it and for ever let life out. But Sohrab saw his thought, and held his hands, and with a soothing voice he spake, and said, Father, forbear! For I but meet to-day the doom which at my birth was written down in heaven, and thou art heaven's unconscious hand. Surely my heart cried out that it was thou, when first I saw thee, and thy heart spoke too, I know it. But fate trod those promptings down under its iron heel. Fate engaged the strife, and hurled me on my father's spear. But let us speak no more of this. I find my father, let me feel that I have found. Come, Sit beside me on this sand, and take my head betwixt thy hands, and kiss my cheeks, and wash them with thy tears, and say, my son, quick, quick, for number'd are my sands of life and swift. For like the lightning to this field I came, and like the wind I go away, sudden and swift, and like a passing wind. But it was writ in heaven that this should be. So said he, and his voice released the heart of Rustum, and his tears broke forth. He cast his arms round his son's neck, and wept aloud, and kissed him, and all fell on both the hosts when they saw Rustum's grief. And Ruksh the horse, with his head bowing to the ground, and mane sweeping the dust, came near, and in mute woe, first to the one then to the other, moved his head, as if inquiring what their grief might mean. And from his dark compassionate eyes the big warm tears rolled down and caked the sand. But Rustum chid him with stern voice, and said, Ruksh, now thou grievest, but O Ruksh, thy feet should first have rotted on their nimble joints, or ere they brought thy master to this field. But Sohrab looked upon the horse, and said, Is this then Ruksh? How often in past days my mother told me of thee, thou brave steed, my terrible father's terrible horse, and said that I should one day find thy lord and thee. Come, let me lay my hand upon thy mane. O Ruksh, thou art more fortunate than I, for thou hast gone where I shall never go, and snuff'd the breezes of my father's home. And thou hast trod the sands of Seistan, and seen the river of Helmund, and the lake of Zirah, and the aged Zal himself has often stroked thy neck, and given thee food, corn in a golden platter soaked with wine, and said, O Ruksh, bear Rustum well. But I have never known my grandsire's furrowed face, nor seen his lofty house in Seistan, nor slaked my thirst at the clear Helmund stream, but lodged among my father's foes, and seen Afrasiab cities only, Samarcand, Bokhara, and lone Khiva in the waste, and the black Turkman tents, and only drunk the desert rivers, Morghab and Tijend, Kohik, and where the Kalmucks feed their sheep, the northern Seir, and this great Oxus stream, the yellow Oxus, by whose brink I die. Then with a heavy groan Rustum bewailed, Oh, that its waves were flowing over me! Oh, that I saw its grains of yellow silt roll tumbling in the current over my head! But with a grave, mild voice Sohrab replied, Desire not that, my father, thou must live. For some are born to do great deeds and live, as some are born to be obscured and die. Do thou the deeds I die too young to do, and reap a second glory in thine age. Thou art my father, and thy gain is mine. But come, thou seest this great host of men which follow me. I pray thee, slay not these. Let me entreat for them. What have they done? They followed me, my hope, my fame, my star. Let them all cross the Oxus back in peace. But me thou must bear hence, not send with them, but carry me with thee to Seistan, and place me on a bed, and mourn for me, thou and the snow-haired Zal and all thy friends. And thou must lay me in that lovely earth, and heap a stately mound above my bones, and plant a far-seen pillar over all, that so the passing horseman on the waste may see my tomb a great way off, and cry, Sohrab, the mighty Rustum's son, lies there, whom his great father did in ignorance kill, and I be not forgotten in my grave. And with a mournful voice Rustum replied, Fear not. As thou hast said, Sohrab, my son, so shall it be. For I will burn my tents, and quit the host, and bear thee hence with me, and carry thee away to Seistan, and place thee on a bed, and mourn for thee, with the snow-headed Zal and all my friends. And I will lay thee in that lovely earth, and heap a stately mound above thy bones, and plant a far-seen pillar over all, and men shall not forget thee in thy grave. And I will spare thy host, yea, let them go. Let them all cross the Oxus back in peace. What should I do with slaying any more? For would that all whom I have ever slain might be once more alive, my bitterest foes, and they who were called champions in their time, and through whose death I won that fame I have, and I were nothing but a common man, a poor mean soldier, and without renown. So thou mightest live too, my son, my son. Or rather would that I, even I myself, might now be lying on this bloody sand near death, and by an ignorant stroke of thine, not thou of mine, and I might die, not thou, and I, not thou, be borne to Seistan, and Zal might weep above my grave, not thine, and say, O son, I weep thee not too sore, for willingly I know thou meetest thine end. But now in blood and battles was my youth, and full of blood and battles is my age, and I shall never end this life of blood. Then at the point of death Sohrab replied, A life of blood indeed, thou dreadful man! But thou shalt yet have peace, only not now, not yet! But thou shalt have it on that day when thou shalt sail in a high-masted ship, thou and the other peers of Kai Khosroo, returning home over the salt blue sea, from laying thy dear master in his grave. And Rustum gazed in Sohrab's face and said, Soon be that day, my son, and deep that sea. Till then, if fate so wills, let me endure. He spoke, and Sohrab smiled on him, and took the spear, and drew it from his side, and eased his wound's imperious anguish. But the blood came welling from the open gash, and life flowed with the stream all down his cold white side. The crimson torrent ran dim now, and soiled like the soiled tissue of white violets, left freshly gathered on their native bank by children whom their nurses call with haste indoors from the sun's eye. His head drooped low, his limbs grew slack, motionless, white he lay, white with eyes closed. Only when heavy gasps, deep heavy gasps, quivering through all his frame, convulsed him back to life, he opened them, and fixed them feebly on his father's face. Till now all strength was ebbed, and from his limbs unwillingly the spirit fled away, regretting the warm mansion which it left, and youth, and bloom, and this delightful world. So on the bloody sand Sohrab lay dead, and the great Rustum drew his horseman's cloak down over his face, and sate by his dead son. As those black granite pillars, once high rear'd by Jemshid men Persepolis to bear his house, now mid their broken flights of steps lie prone, enormous, down the mountain side, so in the sand lie Rustum by his son. And night came down over the solemn waste, and the two gazing hosts, and that sole pair, and darkened all. And a cold fog with night crept from the Oxus. Soon a hum arose, as of a great assembly loosed, and fires began to twinkle through the fog. For now both armies moved to camp, and took their meal. The Persians took it on the open sand, southward, the Tartars by the river marge, and Rustum and his son were left alone. But the majestic river floated on, out of the mist and hum of that low land, into the frosty starlight, and there moved, rejoicing, through the hushed Chorasmian waste. Under the solitary moon he flowed, right for the polar star, past Organji, brimming and bright and large. Then sands begin to hem his watery march, and dam his leagues, and split his currents, that for many a league the shorn and parcelled Oxus strains along, through beds of sand and matted rushy isles. Oxus, forgetting the bright speed he had in his high mountain cradle in Pamere, a foiled circuitous wanderer, till at last the longed for dash of waves is heard, and wide his luminous home of waters opens, bright and tranquil, from whose floor the new bathed stars emerge and shine upon the Aral Sea. End of Sohrab and Rustum by Matthew Arnold. Recording by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com.